Today we are cooking up 5 simple dinner meals that include whole foods, simple ingredients, and a focus on a balanced plate method. My approach really focuses on like a higher protein plate, using smart carbs that also include fiber on the plate and healthy fats to help you have lasting energy, stay satisfied, and eat for optimal metabolic health. So let's dive into the cooking today. Here I have all the ingredients for the crock-pot pork roast that I'm going to be making in the video here. Very simple ingredients. You probably already have most of these things in your fridge or on your countertop. First things first, I am just putting the pork shoulder into the crock-pot, just taking it out of the package. And then I am going in with some salt and sprinkling that on there pretty heavily, just to help some enzymatic breakdown of the pork with the salt. Then I'm going in with some garlic to add a lot of flavor. Love getting the big garlic container from Costco. It is an endless supply and lasts a very long time. Adds so much flavor to the dish. And then I am grabbing some onions and going in. These were actually frozen, so it was very easy. I didn't have to chop them. I like to pre-chop a lot of onions and then freeze them in those baggies, and it makes it easier for later on. Now I'm going in with some paprika and making sure that I'm fully covering the roast there. And I am going in with some garlic powder and then onion powder. I'll be coming in here with that real quick and giving that a nice heavy base foundation of the seasonings. Then pepper, of course, so you guys can see nothing crazy with the seasonings, just very generic, like your basics that you'd have in the pantry. Then I'm gonna pour about half cup of the bone broth in there. And again, I get this bone broth from Costco, a lot cheaper. Now I'm going into chopping the carrots, and very easy. Like, I love getting whole carrots because I feel like they hold an extra crunch and extra flavor. So I do like buying whole carrots, and usually buying the whole carrots is actually more of a budget-friendly option, surprisingly. Now you can make this recipe tons and tons easier and just get pre-cut carrots, but I just think that whole carrots are superior to the pre-cut, pre-washed carrots. So as I finish those up, I'm gonna be taking those and I'm gonna dump those into the crock pot with the pork shoulder sitting in there. So then we're gonna go into chopping the baby potatoes, and I'm simply just gave them a good vinegar rinse and wash in the bag, making sure I wash them really well. You wanna be sure to really wash your produce really, really good. And I like to cut them in half because they cook a lot better. And like with the whole potatoes, you probably could do that, but I just like doing the halves because then it's like more evenly distributed throughout the meals when you're like portioning it out later on and serving it. Then I'm gonna really take those and I'm gonna dump those in with the carrots and just roll those on in. As you can see, it's kind of one of those dump and go meals. You really could do this right before work and get it all set. I like to do a little wipe down before I put the lid on, make sure all the seasonings are off of there. And then I put that lid on, and then I'm gonna select this. As you can see, my crock pot is quite old, so you can't really see the words and numbers really well, but I'm just kind of guesstimating here of what I know about my crock pot. So I'm gonna put it first on low for about 8 hours. You can do 10. I think 10 would be so much better, just to like really marinate in those flavors and get that full effect. Now we're going into, I'm just taking a fork and I'm gonna pull apart the pork, and you can see that at first I'm gonna take out some of the bones. The bones should come out really easily if the pork is done. And so it's basically should pull apart like with the meat itself. You can see it's like the bone is just falling off there. And so I put that into a separate container so I can discard that later. But yeah, essentially I'm gonna go in with the fork again, and then I'm just gonna shred everything up and make sure that all gets mixed up really well so that when I go to serve it, it's kind of like evenly portioned as best as possible. And as you can get a close up, there's nothing like a good old crock pot roast, especially with fall coming up. I love roast all year round, really. Both beef roast and pork roast. And so I am just dishing this out using a slotted spoon and just portioning that out. I like to make sure I have a nice big bulk of like that protein from the pork on there. And then I like to get some of those baby potatoes for the carbs and some of the carrots for some extra fiber and some carbs as well. But there you have it. Extremely simple, you guys, and super easy to make. Now let's move on to the spaghetti squash and steak. And so if you never microwaved a spaghetti squash, you're going to learn right now. All you got to do is poke a bunch of holes with a fork around the whole spaghetti squash to really let it aerate when it's in the microwave. And you can see it's fairly easy to do. And so I'm going to put that in the microwave because it's just going to set it on the plate in there. And then I'm going to start it for 7 minutes for the first round and let that go, let that heat up. Meanwhile, while the spaghetti squash is cooking in the microwave, I am getting out the steaks to get ready to prepare and cut up. You can see here I have 2 T-bone steaks. You can use sirloins. That would be great. This is just what we had on hand for our meat supply as far as steaks goes. So that's what we're going to make use out of. So I really like to cut these up into chunks because this time I'm going to cook them in the air fryer. Love doing air fryer steaks. They turn out amazing. And I do actually like to cut off that extra layer of fat. You can see like that white part, that is the fat. And all the white in between the red is the marbling. So I like to cut that out as much as possible. Yes, it does add flavor, but for us, we don't necessarily need that fatty of a cut of protein. So I try to minimize the extra fats on the side. And then of course, you're not going to get into the marbling, taking out that fat. You just make do, but air frying it is going to release some of that fat so that it's not super, so it's a little bit leaner. And that allows for more room for adding fats elsewhere, like you'll see later on in the video. So I'm just getting my air fryer prepped, and I just put some parchment paper down in the bottom for an easy cleanup. I am putting all my steak bites in there, and I'm going to be adding some seasonings here really soon. So I like to take the fork, spread them out a little bit so I can get an even coating of stuff. And so I'm starting out with this like steak seasoning that I got as a gift, and I love it. I think it's from Tastefully Simple, so extremely good like for your steaks and stuff. And then I'm just gonna enter this into the air fryer, and I like to do that at 375 for about 15 minutes, and then I'll check it halfway through, stir that around. Okay, so steak is in the air fryer. What I'm doing is I am going to just flip the spaghetti squash, and I'm gonna add another 7 minutes to the microwave to let that cook all the way through. Fast forward to that being done, I'm taking this out with an oven mitt because this spaghetti squash is extremely, extremely hot now that it's fully cooked. So I'm just taking a knife and I am cutting that spaghetti squash in half. And as you can see, I had to kind of like take the oven mitt because it is so hot and you can see the steam coming off of it. So I like to cut it there, and then I will eventually take a spoon to get the inside of the seeds out. So you want to be able to scoop those out. And I just take a dish that's next to me, and I'm just gonna put those in there for now so that I can discard them later. Now that all the seeds are out, I'm just taking a couple of teaspoons of butter and I'm putting them on each side. And what this is going to do is going to add some flavor, a little bit of fat in there. And I'm just taking this spaghetti squash, and you can see it's just pulling apart. Spaghetti squash as the beauty she is right there. And so I'm just taking that through there, and to add a little bit more flavor and pizzazz, adding garlic and onion powder. Love those two things. They are lovely. And then I'm adding those in to add that extra pizzazz there. Of course, get my salt cellar to sprinkle some salt in there and make sure that that adds some flavor too. We don't, nobody wants to eat some bland spaghetti squash, and not typical. I'm not that person. I like to add some seasonings to it to really liven it up. Okay, so now that I have all the spaghetti squash ready to go and flavored and everything, I am plating this on the plate. So you can, you could even do the whole half of a spaghetti squash, honestly. It's very voluminous, high in fiber, has some carbs in there, but it is a lower carbohydrate source. So if you're mixing this with pasta, it can really add volume to your plate, as you can see. So typically I like to just put that base. For now, I'm just gonna do some Parmesan, shredded Parmesan on there, and then add the steak bites here in a second to make a little Parmesan spaghetti squash little mixture here. And so there you have it. Is a very simple, like, plated dish, spaghetti squash and steak. Okay, now we're moving into a very quick and easy dinner meal that I just had whipped up. Usually what I do here is I'm looking, okay, what do I already have for vegetables, colors, and fibers? Here I had a bag of frozen mixed peppers from Trader Joe's, had a red onion, which I'm chopping up right now. And then I found that I had a couple of zucchini left in the fridge, so I'm gonna go ahead and utilize those and chop them up to get them ready for roasting and cooking in the pan. Now I am taking my pan, which has already been heating up while I was chopping those veggies. I'm putting a little bit of avocado oil in there. And what I like to do with this is I'll let it sit for 30 seconds to a minute, let the oil kind of warm up a little bit, and then I will, move the pan around so it evenly spreads out. Love getting the Costco size of the garlic, the minced garlic, because it lasts forever and saves money in the long run without having to buy those like small little jars all the time. So what I do is I let that the garlic really start to cook, and then I start adding the onions so that they can start cooking as well, getting that flavor. What happens during this process is like the flavors really start coming out of the garlic and onion when you're heating it up in the oil. I like to give it a quick little stir with the spoon and let it sit for a few minutes. So now what I'm doing here is I'm taking the whole bag of the Trader Joe's frozen pepper mix, throwing that in there and stirring it around, making sure that it's spread out evenly in the bottom of the pan. I'm also going to add the zucchini in, and this is a lot of zucchini, so this meal obviously looks like it's going to have a lot of volume, which it will, which is great because I like making more for leftovers for 1 to 2 meals. And then I'm going to put the lid on and cook that for a while this ground beef is cooking on the side. I already had the ground beef going while the garlic, onion, veggies were going as well. I love this mince, like the tool I'm using is from Pampered Chef actually. Makes life a whole lot easier, especially with like ground beef or any ground meats that you're trying to split up. And this beef was a little bit frozen, so I had to like chop it up a little bit more, let it cook a little bit down a little bit. Then I go back to the veggies. I'm gonna add like a hefty serving of some Himalayan salt on there for flavor. Add the lid back on, come back to the ground beef as that cooks through a little bit. And then usually I drain it, so I didn't show myself draining the fat out of this, but I did. And then I go ahead and add the seasoning. So garlic powder, salt, onion powder, pepper. I keep it pretty simple, especially with ground beef, because that way these flavors can be used in a lot of different meals. And like if you were to use, taco seasoning in this meal, it might get a little old after the third or fourth time you eat it. So I like to create ground beef, any like ground turkey, whatever, and just use those basic seasonings to add the flavor. So give that a good stir around, make sure all the flavors are dispersed in there. And then I was cooking some rice in the rice maker on the side. Very easy. That was cooking all while everything else was going. So we got the rice, and then we have the beef and the vegetables that are in there. So 1, 2, 3, making a meal. Easy as that. Took less than 25 minutes, I believe, altogether. And so this is just kind of an example of how I would dish this out. If you're somebody looking for a more blood sugar stable meal, I would probably recommend like half cup of that cooked rice, and then really make sure you have at least like 4 to 5 ounces of this cooked like protein. So here we have ground beef, adding that into the bowl, and then moving on to the veggies. Wanting to really volumize this with at least like a cup of these cooked veggies, cup to a cup and a half, if you're trying to go for balanced blood sugars. So there you have it, super easy meal. So now we're back to the rice maker again for this other, it's easy, quick and easy, like chicken stir fry. I do love using bone broth for cooking rice. Adds a few extra grams of protein, get the collagen, vitamins, and minerals in there. And I just do it like I would measure out water in there. So cook that up, adds a lot of flavor to the rice. Meanwhile, while the rice is cooking, I had pre-marinated like some chicken thighs and just put them in a Ziploc baggie. I believe I put like garlic powder, onion powder, some lemon in there, just like a little fresh zing to it. And I'm just putting a piece of parchment paper in the air fryer on the bottom to help reduce the mess afterwards. I don't know if anybody else, has this issue. Like after, cooking in the air fryer, you have such a mess to clean up, especially cooking proteins like this. So I like to do the parchment paper. You can buy the parchment paper inserts, but this is honestly cheaper, and I just take the parchment paper and split it in half in a typical parchment paper roll. And I'm just dumping this in there and like making sure that's evenly spread out. Put that into the air fryer, and I'm going to set it at 375 just for 10 minutes in the beginning, and then I'll come back and check on it and probably shake it around. You want to cook your chicken until 165 in the middle, internal temp, to make sure it's done. Meanwhile, I was heating up a pan on the stovetop while I was getting the chicken in the air fryer, and I added a little bit of avocado oil. And again, plain simple here, taking some Aldi like broccoli stir fry mix. I'm gonna take a couple of those frozen bags, just cut them open, and I will just put those in the pan. And this calls for an insanely easy weeknight meal, especially for a family. This goes a long way. We usually have leftovers, and if you have a bigger family, triple the recipe. That'd be totally fine. So I will just let these veggies cook. I'll stir them up here. Just make sure like the oil gets dispersed around the vegetables, and put a lid on to let those veggies really cook through while everything else is cooking. But before even putting the lid on, I'm going to add some salt and my typical onion powder, garlic powder, pepper. Like I said, always just keep it simple. We don't need anything really crazy as far as like seasonings go. They're very versatile seasonings, and I feel like it adds just the best flavor to all meals. And you'll see here at the end of the video that I do add like coconut aminos to kind of give it that stir fry feel at the end when I make the meal and actually build it in the bowl. Now we're back to the air fryer, and I am just checking on those chicken thighs in the air fryer, shaking it around. Usually I use like a tool to kind of like break it up and really help the chicken cook thoroughly, all the pieces and everything. And then I will just put it back into the air fryer, probably start it for another like 5 to 10 minutes, and just use my thermometer to check the internal temp to see if it's done. All right, now we are to just assembling the bowl. So on the bottom, I'm using the bone broth rice just to create that carb base. And this is gonna add the flavor. This is where you get like your main source of carbohydrate in this meal. And then I'm gonna take the veggies and layer that on top. So we're also gonna have fiber, some extra nutrients there too. And I do this in a strategic way to build this meal so that it's like, okay, you're eating protein and then the fiber from the veggies, and then you get to the rice. Just kind of a way to kind of help slow you down eating and everything. So the chicken goes on top, and then I will take some coconut aminos, and I'm just going to like put that all on top there, just about a couple teaspoons or so. And there you have it. That's just the base foundation. I do like adding some extra healthy fat. This is an avocado. It looks a little brown. We had cut it the day earlier, but no food waste here. We are using that. It's good to go. So that will add some extra fiber, some healthy monounsaturated fats to this meal. And very simple, pretty darn easy. And there you have it. Could be a really nice, easy weeknight meal. All right, now we are back to the zucchini game here. We are making a pork chop, some air fryer pork chops, and I just, again, we usually have zucchini and potatoes on hand, huge staples in our household. So for a non-starchy vegetable, I'm just gonna chop up this zucchini here and make sure that I dice it into cubes so that it can roast evenly in the oven. Now I'm getting out these baby potatoes. Love these potatoes so much. I get them at Costco, and they're actually a really good deal and when you buy them in bulk. And so love them for, just like chop them in half and roast them or throw them in the air fryer. Some of the larger ones I do into quarters, just so, again, like it cooks evenly and we're not left with having like some potatoes that are still a little crunchy, some potatoes that are super done on the sheet pan when we put all of that on there soon. So here I am again taking avocado oil. I drizzled that over the potatoes and zucchini. I'm also adding some Himalayan salt on there for flavor, onion powder, of course, and then garlic powder, of course, and some pepper too. If you haven't caught on my theme, that this is my theme: avocado oil and those seasonings. Super easy, streamlined. So I'm putting these into the air fryer and roasting those up while I'm preparing the pork chops on the side. And so I will just put these into the air fryer. I like to bring the air fryer out from the wall. Don't like it close to the wall, fire hazard. So bring that out. I'll put those veggies in and I'll put it on the roast setting, 375 for about 12 minutes. And I actually cooked the veggies before this. And so I was marinating pork chops in like balsamic vinegar, some avocado oil, garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper. So those had been marinating for a while. And I just swapped out the parchment papers and I'm putting the pork chops in there. We're going to do 400 degrees and air fry them for about 14 minutes in the beginning. Pork chop should be, again, like about that 165 internal temp to make sure that it is safe to eat. Same thing with like poultry and that kind of thing. So then I just am plating this. Look how crispy the fat got on that pork chop, and super easy, simple fiber, carbs, protein, and some fats from that avocado oil and the pork chop, which calls for a very balanced meal.